Bengazi, 1955. IMDb.com says this movie is a film noir. But is it? Let's start at the beginning. Hello to all the classic people who are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know that there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on Bengazi, 1955. IMDb has this movie rated at 5.1, which I feel is generous. On RottenTomatoes.com, it has nothing on the tomato meter and only 10% on the audience score. This was a hard watch, and by that, I mean it's not very good, and I had to force myself to go back and keep watching it. It's terrible. It has some decent actors, many of whom have strong film noir credentials. So let's go there. Actors. Richard Conte played the rough criminal John Gilmore. We first discussed Conte in the great anti-war movie They Came to Codora, 1959. He was also featured in two film noirs, The Blue Gardenia, 1953, and Thieves Highway, 1949, and there are links to those below. Later roles include the crime drama Ocean's 11, 1960, and The Godfather, 1972. I never knew it was Barcini until now. Victor McLaglen played Robert Emmett Donovan, an older drunk. I have mentioned McLaglen in several reviews, but only as a director, not as an actor. These films include Chisholm, 1972, McClintock, 1963, The Undefeated, 1969, and Hellfighters, 1968. His best-known acting role is probably as Squire Danaher in The Quiet Man, 1952. Richard Carlson, an American actor, was in the role of Scottish Inspector Levering. I first covered Carlson in the classic horror film Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. Carlson has good sci-fi cred with It Came from Outer Space, 1953, and The Valley of Guanji, 1969, fighting dinosaurs in Mexico. He also appeared in film noirs Fly By Night, 1942, The Amazing Mr. X, 1948, Behind Locked Doors, 1948, and The Sound of Fury, 1950. Mala Powers played Eileen Donovan, a doe-eyed child trying to reconnect with her father. Powers has a long history of film noir and noir-adjacent films. These films include Edge of Doom, 1950, Outrage, 1950, City That Never Sleeps, 1953, Death in Small Doses, 1957, and Man on the Prowl, 1957. Great tough guy character actor Richard Erdman played Englishman Thelby. Erdman had a big role as the barracks chief in the POW film Stalag 17, 1953. And there's a link below. Of course, that film was directed by Billy Wilder, the director responsible for film noirs Double Indemnity, 1944, The Lost Weekend, 1945, Sunset Boulevard, 1950, and Ace in the Hole, 1951. I've covered Erdman in several film noirs, including The Devil Thumbs a Ride, 1947, Cry Danger, 1951, and The Blue Gardenia, 1953. Pedro Gonzalez had a tiny role as Kamal. Gonzalez is best known for showing up in the background of John Wayne movies. As far as film noir, he had a bit in Borderline, 1950, and The Ring, 1952. Hilary Brooke was cast in the tiny role of Nora Nielsen, essentially a woman lying in bed. Brooke has many film noir and noir-adjacent films. These films include Ministry of Fear, 1944, Strange Impersonation, 1946, Body Hold, 1949, Confidence Girl, 1952. I have to give that one another look. Mexican Manhunt, 1953, and The House Across the Lake, 1954, aka Heat Wave. Story. The story begins with John Gilmore, Richard Conte, and Basim J. Novello stealing a lorry from a military compound in Bengazi, Libya. Military Inspector Levering, Richard Carlson, visits Gilmore's bar, suspecting that he is responsible for the lorry theft. Levering has a strange interaction with Nora Nielsen, Hilary Brooke, Gilmore's live-in girlfriend. Later, Levering is present when ex-military and recidivist criminal Selby, Richard Erdman, is released from prison. Selby is ordered not to leave the city limits. Gilmore's partner, Robert Emmett Donovan, Victor McLaglen, determines that Gilmore stole the lorry and wants to go along for the forthcoming adventure. Gilmore agrees and tells that Selby knows where a hoard of gold is located. It's in a moss near a desert oasis. Gilmore says that if Donovan contributes 100 gallons of gasoline, he can join for 1/3 of the take. Before they can leave, Eileen Donovan, Mala Powers, arrives in Bengazi looking to reconnect with her estranged father, Robert Emmett Donovan. She is interviewed by Inspector Levering, who warns her about the dangers of the city. Eileen meets her father, and they have a cute reunion. Later, Gilmore reminds Donovan that they are leaving at midnight for their desert adventure. Donovan tells Eileen that Gilmore is forcing the older man to go along. Eileen confronts Gilmore about the trip. He kisses her. She slaps his face. Donovan gives Eileen a ticket to leave and says he will meet her soon. Levering and his man, Peters, Maurice Hill, are in the bar watching the comings and goings. Kamal, Pedro Gonzalez, is darting around in the background. Levering quizzes Eileen about her father and then tries to get a date with her. In the lorry, Gilmore and Donovan pick up Selby outside the city walls. Selby says that he shook off the cop who was following him. Levering is shown the dead body of the cop back in a city alley. The trio stop in the desert to wait for sunrise before continuing their journey. Isn't that backwards? Gilmore sees that Selby is wearing the dead cop's watch. Gilmore gives Selby a thorough slapping. Donovan stops the fight and takes a pistol from Selby. In the morning, the trio parallel the road and drive in the sugar sand. At one point, they have to camouflage the vehicle with a tarp when a military search plane flies over. Later in the day, the three criminals reach the mosque and oasis. This part of the movie invokes a Sahara 1943 vibe. At the waterhole, Donovan passes out, showing that his heart is failing. While they are distracted, Selby escapes to the mosque after stealing all the pistols. Gilmore and Donovan run for the lorry, but Selby staggers out of the building. He then falls, showing a knife stuck in his back. Gilmore searches the mosque and determines that the attacker was a single guard who was left to watch the building. The guard has escaped into the desert following the stabbing. Donovan brings Selby inside for medical treatment. Donovan tries to get Selby to give him the location of the gold. Selby won't provide the information to his criminal partners. He dies. They bury him inside the ruins. Gilmore is ready to leave before the Bedouins arrive. Donovan insists that they stay and look for the gold. Donovan goes on the roof to watch while Gilmore goes to the lorry. He has a large machine gun in the back that he brings to the roof. It's now nighttime, and Donovan lights a cigarette, and the Bedouins open fire. Gilmore fires back with the machine gun, and things quiet down. In the morning, they realize the lorry with all their supplies is gone. Eileen goes to the airport to leave for Tripoli. Levering stops her from boarding the plane. This is where it gets weird. For some reason, he loads her on a search plane with himself, Peters, and a pilot. Levering is all cop when he's on the airplane with Eileen. Desperate for water, Donovan signals the search plane. The pilot, who must be the greatest since James Stewart's plane went down while en route to Bengazi in the Flight of the Phoenix 1965, lands the plane on the rolling sugar sand dunes. The plane is fired upon by unseen Bedouins. The plane explodes and the pilot is killed. This movie is now giving me Bojas 1939 vibes. Gilmore gives Levering the lowdown on their situation. They are cut off from water and are only holding the Bedouins back with the machine gun. Eileen gives her father a pretty severe tongue lashing. Gilmore and Donovan come clean and tell about the Bedouins' gold that Selby found. Eileen makes a break for the water and is pinned down by gunfire. Gilmore makes it to her and they eventually reach the waterhole. At the waterhole, Eileen realizes that Gilmore is not the bad guy after all. I like bad boys and I cannot lie. Donovan thinks he can make a break and get help during the Muslims' evening prayers. Gilmore and Eileen use the prayers to make it back to the mosque. Donovan heads over the dune, but is shot by an unseen gunman. Gilmore and Peters bury Donovan outside the building. Peters has some kind of existential attack and makes Gilmore promise that he will not bury him outside in the cold desert. Gilmore agrees. Eileen has a minor meltdown as well about the death of her father. Gilmore says she is crying for a man she doesn't know. He finally says that he loved Gilmore even though he had faults. That night, the Bedouins begin firing at the men on the roof. I noticed that they only guard one side of the mosque and are only attacked on that side. I think I see a flaw in the attack plan. Levering tries to climb to a higher elevation and is shot in the leg. Finally, Gilmore gives a blast with a machine gun and stops the attack. Eileen tends to Inspector Levering, but she is still pretty distraught. He tells her his backstory and where he comes from, and he is still trying to date her. More firing is heard from the roof. Gilmore comes down and says they are out of machine gun ammunition. Eileen leaves Levering and goes to Gilmore to console him. She tells him her feelings of love for him. Instead of a one-night stand, I think she's looking for a last night stand. He says he loves her too. Then they kiss. In the morning, Peters is dead. No wound is shown, so that's up in the air. Gilmore digs a grave inside the mosque, but soon discovers the hidden Bedouin gold. Gilmore decides that he will take the gold and leave. Eileen and Levering think he is deserting them so he can have the gold alone. He walks out onto the dunes and is soon hit in the shoulder by a round from an unseen shooter. He then begins yelling to the tribe that he is bringing them their gold and the two people at the mosque are innocent. He falls and drops the gold. Levering tells Eileen that Gilmore took the gold to save them. She admits that she loves Gilmore and begins sobbing. A line of armed tribesmen crest the dune and look down towards Gilmore. Levering and Eileen wait in the mosque because they have no other choice. Finally, the tribesmen come over the dune and say they are bringing back the lorry and they are free to go. Eileen sees the wounded Gilmore coming towards her. She screams his name and runs to him. Analysis. Following Ball State University professor Richard L. Edwards' 7-point outline from the TCM-sponsored Into the Darkness Investigating Film Noir class, I will judge how many of the points apply to this film. Element 1. Post-war anxiety and social malaise. This movie is set in the post-World War II era, and John Gilmore, Richard Conte, Robert Emmett Donovan, Victor McLaglen, and Selby, Richard Erdman, sure had a melancholic outlook on life. The film never explains how Gilmore, from New York, was left in Africa following the war, even though the Americans were a continent away when the war ended. There is a very light tension between the British occupiers and the gang of criminals. Element 2, guilt and dread. This was completely missing from the movie. There was never any thought given to the consequences of their actions or associations, just floating along like a turd in the tide. Element 3, psychoanalysis and trauma. While the war veterans would likely have trauma, it was not brought out in this film in any manner. They mouth some regrets now and then for being drunkards or leaving their family. The only character who even remotely fits this element is Eileen Donovan, Mala Powers, having lost her mother and found her father to be a lying drunk who is going to abandon her for a desert adventure. Element 4, criminality and the limits of rational investigation. Gilmore, Donovan, and Selby are certainly criminals, and they are never very concerned about their actions, except when Selby murdered a police officer. That's where Gilmore draws the line. Harkening back to another Richard Conte film, The Godfather 1972, Don Corleone murders, runs prostitutes, and steals, but he's a good guy because he refuses to sell heroines. The same for Conte's character here. If he draws the line at murder, he may be okay deep down. Element 5, existential despair. There is no great element of despair hanging over any of the characters. They live in a backwater hellhole, but it is by their own choosing. There are brief moments where one or the other of them will reflect on their life, but it's simply a line or two followed by no change in course. Element 6, the inability to separate truth from lies. There is nothing hidden in this film. Everybody is out in the open, and none of the characters are fooling themselves. Element 7, the role of women in post-war society. There are two women in this film. The first is Nora Nielsen, Hillary Brooke, who just lies in bed and is treated poorly by Gilmore. The second is Eileen Donovan, Mala Powers. She's a doe-eyed waif who searches for love between gunfights and a desert trap. There is nothing to indicate that these women had a new role in society. Conclusion. I watched this movie so you never have to. Back to the question at hand. Is this movie a film noir? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. It fails more or less on each of the elements. Since IMDb lists this as a film noir, I'm going to leave it in my list of all film noirs, but I'm slotting this film at 1,112. This places it behind the film I assume would be the worst film based solely on the title, number 1111, Pillow of Death 1945. World famous short summary, she's got a thing for bad boys. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you want more, be sure to subscribe, hit the like, ring the bell. Beware the Moors. All right, in a second, a couple of boxes are going to pop up. The first one is a film noir review similar to today's, and the other is a list of film noirs that have been reviewed.